The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our DrivenCRM Inventory Setup webinar. Today we'll be talking about the kinds of information that flows back and forth between QuickBooks and Driven, as well as some additional options that Driven allows for in its item setup, including things like shipping estimates, serial number tracking, price levels, quantity breaks, and how assemblies work within Driven. So we'll go ahead and get started. I see we have 2 attendees today. As with all of our webinars, they are a listen-only kind of a system, but you are able to type a question if you have any during the webinar into that GoToWebinar panel, and I will pause periodically to try and answer those. So from a beginning point, as a basic perspective, inventory research, or item research as we call it within Driven, is accessed here through the lookup menu. That's probably the most extensive area that you can see information about items if you're choosing to look those up. And the kinds of items that come over from Driven is the first thing I want to talk about in this list here. When you synchronize with your QuickBooks company file, we automatically bring in all of your inventory items. If you have any assemblies defined within QuickBooks, we import those as well. Non-inventory items, service-type items from QuickBooks, and the other item as well, other charges as QuickBooks calls them. So those are the types of items that we're compatible with from the item list out of QuickBooks. And when I come into this inventory research screen, by default, I see the entire list that got brought over from QuickBooks. And we'll talk in detail about the information that comes over, how it comes over, and then what you can see here. But this inventory research screen is used typically by both your salespeople and your purchasing people to look up information from within Driven. If you want to be able to provide your salespeople or purchasing people with information about all of these part numbers. For instance, here is my retail price. I have an item called a custom build item. And I want my sales reps to be able to see that this item sells for $500. Its average cost, if I'm allowed to see cost in my rolls, is set to $17. Okay, the last cost also synchronized over from $17 as well. Then the other information that we can see in here are the categories that this item is placed into. We'll talk about how and when you can control and add additional categories as well. Also who the manufacturer of this item is, and then what the part number and description for the item are, as well as what we call the storage or bin location for the item and the item alert or any message that you may have tied to this item. I see Debbie has a question over here on the right-hand side that says, can you migrate the items list directly from Oasis? Yes, Debbie, if you're going to be moving from Oasis to Driven, you can import all of that data from Oasis directly over to Driven, yes. That would be part of your data migration. Now, in addition, on this inventory research screen right here in the main tab, you see some master inventory totals for this particular part number. So your salespeople have the flexibility to see, as well as your purchasing people, that the on-hand quantity, which to Driven means this is how many are physically sitting out there on my shelf if I were to go out in the warehouse right now. As a total, I have 5 sitting there on the warehouse shelf. Now, the next column is called allocated. These are how many are on a committed sales order that has not been invoiced yet. So I have 5 pending to go out and be shipped at the moment. So my net available after that is 0. So I would be able to tell customers, as of right now, I don't have any available that I can sell you. Also, the column above that, the row above that called on order, shows it as 0 right now, meaning that I do not have any on a purchase order that are pending to be received. And I'm typing out answer to Debbie's question as well, so she'll have that. So all of that information is accessible directly right here on the main inventory research screen. There are some other tabs across the bottom here that show you additional information, the first of those being the stock tab. Now, in my setup in my Driven, I have defined additional warehouses where product can be stored or made available for sale and receipt. And I can see here that I have 5 sitting in the California warehouse, 0 in my default warehouse. Well, 4 of my sales are from California warehouse. 1 of them has been allocated from the default warehouse. So in other words, I would have a problem right now. I can't fulfill that one to the default warehouse. I would have to move product or ship it from the California warehouse. And similar columns here as well. So the on SO is what we call allocated as well. The on PO column is that on order. So how many are on purchase orders out there pending? And then the in transfer column. Now, typically when we talk about order processing and warehouse movement of product, we also talk about how to transfer product from one warehouse to another warehouse. So that is possible within Driven as well. Now, the remaining next 3 tabs here show us all of the detailed information about how and where this product has moved. So my purchase history would be all purchase orders that I had created for this particular item. You'll see here I had a purchase order 300,002 to Milner's office equipment. The cost was $17. There were 5 on the purchase order, and they've all been received. So all 5 of those have come in. Now, also everyone has the ability to see any purchase order for this item. So in other words, if I had a purchase order for 10 that still have not arrived yet, they would be able to see using this expected ship date when those should be coming in. So your salespeople could intelligently communicate that, oh, I see I have 5 more coming in next Friday that I would be able to ship out to you. You know, we just haven't received them yet. So that's the full detail of the purchase history tab. Now, next tab, my quotation history, is what customers have I sent this proposal to. So right now, I must have a quote out there to Universal Studios for 2 of these custom build items. They've not bought them yet. They're simply proposals. So this might be when you're forecasting things as a purchasing person that these haven't become orders yet, but they have been quoted. Next tab is our order history. So what customers have actually ordered this product. So I see here right now Universal Studios has also ordered 2 of them, and they have not shipped yet. And my Barb Shopping Store has ordered 1 of them that has not shipped either. Now, these numbers here should total, the ones that have been not shipped yet, should total up to your allocated or on sales order. Now, as a note, I frequently do a lot of testing in this demo database here. It's what I use for my webinars and my testing and things, so that's why my numbers probably aren't matching out to my 5 that I have on sales orders at the moment. But in normal operations, when you're doing things like you're supposed to be doing them within Driven, those numbers should match. And so you'd be able to kind of check here who you've got yet to fulfill this for. Also, what customers have ordered it in the past and at what price we sold it to them. Now, the next tab over here for registered product doesn't have anything under here on my custom build because this item is not set to be what we call trackable or recording a serial number. So I'm going to go up to another part number that I have in here, one of my other test part numbers called Black Fabric. And a kind of strange example, but for this one I am set to track registration details on it and track serial numbers. So for that one, under my registered product tab, I have information here that the Barb Shopping Store owns serial number 1234 of this product, and it was installed on February 21st of this year. So you have complete traceability of individual serial numbers down to the customer who has them. Now, we will get into how to set up serial numbers on items within Driven and how to track them, but if you do turn that feature on, then every time you purchase this particular product or sell this particular product, the system will ask you for a serial number as you receive it or ship it. So that'll begin the tracking process for you. And then when you ship it to the customer, it will get registered on their account here. You can see it here in the inventory research screen. You can also see it on the customer's account file, which serial numbers they own. Our stock transfers tab over here would show me any information for what I call a pending transfer within Driven. So in that environment where I said for my custom build kit that I needed to move product from one warehouse to another warehouse. I would do that as a transfer. Well, during that transfer step, which we covered during our order processing webinar, part of that process is to make it pending or to finalize that transfer. If that transfer is marked as pending, meaning, yes, I have sent this from Florida, it's on its way to California, but they have not received it yet. So I don't want to complete or finalize that transfer until it's actually in California and can be used there. In that case, I would make that transfer pending until California gets it, and then I would come back where I would see that pending transfer is under the Stock Transfers tab. So any transfers that have not been finalized yet would show here, and here is where you would come to complete them and finalize them, finish them out. Okay, so this tab in normal operations, once everything's moved into its proper warehouses, should look like this, where it says no records to display. If you have something that hasn't quite moved yet, hasn't quite finished, in which case I would be able to see in the Stock Transfers tab that it's in the In Transfer area, then I would need to come here and finalize out that transfer. And our last tab over here is called Related Configuration. This is going to show me the detail of this particular item and how it is built, if it's an assembly or what QuickBooks calls a group, or what we in Driven also call a related kit, okay, custom build kit. In this case, my custom build item has 1 of my P64 part number coin boxes and 3 of my dollar coin boxes part number P66. And I would also be able to see in here that of this item, if it were an assembly, in order to build this item, I know I need 1 of these and 3 of these. Well, I can see right here that I have -18 on hand and -12 on hand of this. So I would know right here as an inventory type person that I don't have enough product to build any more of these kits or to sell these groups. Now, in my assembly items area over here on the left-hand side of my screen, here are my items that function as QuickBooks assemblies. And we are going to have the same rules that QuickBooks has about those and work in the same way. If you are one of our on-premise customers, I'm using Driven through the IPP platform right now, but our on-premise customers are going to have a button up at the top of their screen here that would say Build Assembly. And that would allow you to tell QuickBooks they need to build an assembly for, let's say, my custom build kit. My custom build kit is not an assembly. Okay, so I need to build maybe some of my interface kits because I don't have enough on hand. So I would choose the build assembly option. It would issue that command to QuickBooks to build however many I tell it and decrement the quantity of the related components inside of it and increase the on hand of the final finished good. So the assembly process works the same in Driven as it does in QuickBooks. The advantage is that when you come here and you're looking at this item, you can see right here whether or not you have enough product to build those assemblies. And you simply come in here, tell it to build the assembly, and it issues that command over to QuickBooks. Now let's actually get into the detail of modifying some of these parts and editing them. So I'm going to choose to edit my interface kit and see what other options I have for Driven, and also see how to modify the information that came over from QuickBooks as well, what kind of information came over. So in order to edit any of the part numbers that already exist in here from my inventory research screen, I simply double click on that part number. It brings me into my maintenance screen where I can edit details about this particular part. And I see all of my information here. So I can see that this particular interface kit is set as an inventory type item. Now, to Driven, if it's an inventory assembly, it's going to say item type inventory here, and under your related products is where you tell it it's an assembly. So very important, this type field and how it relates between Driven and QuickBooks, because the type that it's set to in Driven has to be exactly the same as the type that it's set to in QuickBooks. It can't be a service type item in Driven and an inventory type item in QuickBooks. It will not invoice properly. Because that's how we look up that part. We say look up the inventory item called new interface kit. Okay. Now, Let's talk, or I'm sorry, called whatever the part number field is here. I was highlighting the wrong field. Interface kit 1500. Talk about the rest of these fields here. The part number field came over automatically from QuickBooks. So did the short name. Okay. Now we have a short name in Driven, but we also have what is called a sales description. And in Driven, if both of these are filled in, then it combines the two of those on the invoice description. So you're going to see the short name and the sales description together on the invoice. Right. Then we have, and the advantage of the sales description is you've got a lot more room to type in there. You can type out the full detail spec. See, here it says the interface kit includes the following parts, blah, 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 blah. That would print out on the invoice as well. Sorry. The retail price area here is your default retail price for items to any of your customers. Okay? Keeping in mind that Driven has the capability to restrict and control who can modify pricing on orders, because by default, general level salespeople do not have the ability to change retail price on an item. In that case, the only way for those people to have pricing be modified is to either have some of our automatic price options kicking in, like a price level or a quantity break or a marketing campaign, or to send that over to a manager level person, so someone who has manager role or administrative role would be able to open up the proposal and modify the retail price then. But by default, general sales level only are able to add the item and see what the retail price is. Then they can give discounts, but they cannot modify the retail price. Okay, so important restriction there. The two fields here for average cost and last cost came over automatically from QuickBooks initially, and then if you choose to do purchasing functions within Driven, those will update themselves automatically based upon you receiving items and closing out purchase orders. Okay, you can also manually override these cost fields at any time if you would like to, if you manually update your cost and don't necessarily do it based on purchasing. Next two fields here for our manufacturer's part number and the name of the manufacturer. Identify who is the equipment manufacturer for this particular item, because it might not matter to me that I purchased this item from Milner's Office Supplies. I want to know that Johnson made it, or that it was an HP product or something like that. So I want to know who is the manufacturer so that I can search for that and say, show me all my HP type product. And I also want to potentially see what their part number is for this. So not only does Driven have a part number, but I can tie in the manufacturer's part number, and then also on my vendors tab, I'll be able to tie in a vendor part number. Okay. Debbie is asking which part numbers print on the quote. Driven does have those 3 different part numbers. It actually has more than 3 different part numbers, Debbie, because you can have 5 vendors tied to an item, so each vendor can have its own part number. But typically the part number field from this part number screen is what prints on the invoices and quotes. All right. Our UPC barcode, if you have a barcode field from this particular part number, you can scan that in here if you'd like to simply record that information. And then next we get whether or not this item is going to charge sales tax. So here, let me just type out. My answer here to Debbie. Okay. So whether or not the item is marked as taxable, again, comes over from QuickBooks. Let's talk briefly about this unit of measure feature and unit of measure conversions within Driven. QuickBooks has a similar feature as well if you activate it to where I can set up that I purchase this item by, let's say this is a cable, and I purchase it by the roll. However, I sell it by the each or by the foot or by the something else. So I'd be able to say that I want to sell it by the each. And the very top unit of measure here is what's called the base unit of measure. That is what this item is stored in, sitting on your warehouse shelf, and what everything converts back to. So this to me is your lowest level of unit of measure of this item, or however you want to see it. I want to inventory it by the roll. Okay, I could have my base unit of measure be cable roll. Or I want to inventory it by the feet. I want to go measure it and see how many feet I have. I could set that. Now, when I purchase this item, then I would be able to purchase one roll, and however my unit of measure was set up, which is done in your company setup, then I would be able to, that would automatically convert back to, if there were, let's say, 5,000 eaches in a roll, Driven would show 5,000 eaches now available for sale based upon me receiving that one roll. So it would do those math conversions for you and allow you to purchase in bulk or sell in different kinds of quantities than you purchase in. Okay. I'm going to undo those because I don't necessarily want those. This is how I mess up my part numbers when I'm working in Driven here. So let's not actually put anything in there for now. But you kind of understand the concept of how that might potentially be used. Now, over on the right-hand side of additional settings of this particular part number, I choose whether or not to make the part number inactive, because just like QuickBooks, if you've used or sold this item before, you should not really delete it, because that deletes all of the history and all the links about this particular part number too. So if you don't want to use it anymore, sell it anymore moving forward, I'd simply make that part number inactive. Now, please be aware when you're synchronizing data between QuickBooks and Driven, the inactive option does not set itself on one side or the other once the item has come in. In other words, I can make a part number inactive in Driven. It will still be active in QuickBooks, and vice versa. If I were to go into QuickBooks and make a part number inactive, it would still remain active in Driven, because we do not necessarily switch that flag when we do a synchronization with that. So please be aware that if you want it inactive in both places, you will have to set that to yes in both places. Now we talk about our categories for this item and how those get set. And those are used for searching and helping your salespeople find things, and also for grouping things potentially for discounts. So I put an item in up to 5 different categories at the same time. It's going to have a primary category, which I can set as, you see here, general product, and then it can have up to 4 alternate categories. So this can also go in fabrics or repairs or hardware or something like that if I would like for it to. Now, one note for you here as we talk about categories, because in QuickBooks we do have some clients who've made parts sub-items of other things. Okay, maybe in QuickBooks you've established that hierarchy of hardware and then a colon and then new interface kit listed under that as a sub-item. If you are using that concept within QuickBooks, then that primary category gets assigned automatically as that hardware heading that you had made in QuickBooks. Also, if you have done that, then the QuickBooks item name screen that's here, that field, is going to give you what we call the full path to that part number into QuickBooks. So it's the full hierarchy. In other words, if this were a sub-item of hardware, my QuickBooks item name would say hardware, colon, interface kit, 1500. So please be aware of that if you are using the sub-item concept within QuickBooks. As I said, it imports that way automatically. So you would need to be aware of it in 2 potential cases. If you, for some reason, change that part number within QuickBooks, or you modify it here within Driven without modifying it in QuickBooks, then the next time this part number invoices, it will attempt to create a new part number in QuickBooks because it can't find it in exactly that place anymore. Also, you would need to be aware of that concept if you are creating new part numbers in Driven to have that create a new part number in QuickBooks. which we are capable. You can add new part numbers here in Driven, and then the first time you purchase that item or the first time you sell that item, it will create a part number for you in QuickBooks. But it'll create it by default based upon this part number field, just at that one top level. So if you want to use the hierarchy sub-item feature of QuickBooks, you would have to, here in the QuickBooks item name area, name it exactly where you want it to go under to in QuickBooks. Debbie has another question here. Is there a field limit or level limit to the accounting ID? Can you go 4 deep? Debbie, I've never gone 4 deep before, so I'm not really sure. I would have to check that with our developers. I believe we have gone as deep as 3 levels, but I have not done 4. Okay. Now, let's move on to the rest of the fields here. QuickBooks has a feature at an item level called class. If you have enabled it on your ordering screen, you're able to identify what class that particular item goes into. So here is how Driven would identify that information over to QuickBooks. So you would type in the class for this particular part number here, and then every time we invoice that part number, it would invoice to that class. Next is our discount group code field, and that is used for volume discounting, and as I refer to it, our mix and match discounting feature. It gives you the flexibility. Normally, in Driven, as you're working with the system, you can offer what we call quantity breaks or volume discounts. So one of this particular part number is $50. If you buy 5 of them, maybe I give it to you at $47.50. If you buy 10, I give it to you at $45 with discounts. So the more you buy, the bigger of a discount you get typically. However, you would have to buy 5 of this particular interface kit or 10 of this interface kit to start getting those discounts. Well, maybe I have 4 or 5 different kits that I sell, and if you buy 2 of this kit and 3 of another kit, I want to go ahead and give you those discounts. So I would allow you to combine those different part numbers into volume discounts. The way that you would do that in Driven is you would assign all of those kits to the same discount group code. And you choose what the group code is. If my group code wants to be 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever number I happen to pick for this item, I would assign that same group code number to all of the parts or all of the kits that I want to be combinable. And then I could purchase 2 of this and 6 of another, and I've now gone more than 5. So I would start getting discounts on this particular part number that I had purchased. So some flexibility in combining volume discounts for you using the group code there. Then we have a note as to whether or not this item pays sales commission. So I can set this to pay commission to my salespeople and control how the commission works. Is it based on the selling price of the item? Do they get a % of the sale price, or do they get a % of the profit margin? Our default warehouse identifies where by default I receive this item into and purchase it or sell it out of. So this by default would get set automatically then. Maybe this item always comes out of California. So I would specify its default warehouse to be California. When I receive it, it goes into there. When I sell it, it comes out of there, unless I override it and change it. So if you set neither, then it's going to go to whichever one is the first one in your list, which happens to be my default warehouse here. Okay. Here is the stock or bin location. So that's that information I told you of physically where within my warehouse do I keep this product, so that when I go to receive this item or ship this item, I would be able to print a packing list or a pick list or something like that that would tell my warehouse people where to go find this. And we also offer a lead time field, which would tell me how many days it takes me to get this product into my warehouse from my vendor on average. So I know it takes me 14 days to get this physical product. Now that is everything on our main screen about this particular interface kit item. The other options that are in here, the next one is where we get to start talking about shipping and doing shipping estimates on this particular item. Because typically, Driven allows you, if you want to use it, the capability to do a shipping estimate, to provide you with information real time of, okay, based on the weight of all the items on this order, the zip code that it's going to, it would cost this much to ship via UPS ground, and this much via 2-day air, and this much via FedEx 2-day. It provides different options to your salespeople. Now, so then I need to set up and define, A, that this particular item even charges shipping charges or has to calculate into those, because, for instance, a service type item wouldn't need to contribute to my shipping charge. It doesn't weigh anything, and I don't actually ship it. So I set this item to have shipping charges apply, yes. Then whether or not this item always has to ship separately, or in other words, independently in its own box, can never be combined with anything else. Or if I can group similar items together. Now the option here to group similar items together, if I set this to yes, then it will try to put everything that's in the same product category into the same box. So in other words, all of my general products, which this is assigned to, would attempt to get put into the same box until it reaches one of my carrier's limits, like a dimensional limit or a weight limit. Then the system knows it automatically has to calculate a second box to go in for that shipment. Then I need to identify, and yes, this is identified per each part number, how much this item weighs in pounds and how big it is. You know, it's 4 inches by 7 inches by 12 inches, because that's going to contribute to the shipping charge estimate. And if I note here whether or not I always drop ship this item, because that means it's going to ship from the vendor's location instead of my address. So that is going to change my shipping estimate there, obviously. So I can set this item that's a drop ship item, and then whatever vendor set as the primary vendor is the zip code that it assumes it's coming from. And last is to be able to limit the number of these items I put in a box. The default is to leave this at 0, and then the system, as I said, tries to put as many in one box until it reaches a carrier limit, either dimension-wise or weight-wise. So if you leave it at 0, it'll do that automatically. But if you, as a company, even though this is a fairly lightweight item, maybe you never put more than 3 of them in a box at a time because you don't have a box that fits for the right size or something, I can set the limit here to 3, and then if I have 4 on an order, even if it was under the weight limit and dimension limit, it would automatically use 2 boxes because I had told it never to put more than 3 in a box. So a lot of options for you there, but a lot of detail that we need to be filled in to get the most accurate information out of the estimate feature. Next option here is our serial number tracking. And that is where I tell it, as I mentioned to you here, I need to turn on the serial number tracking for this particular part number. So if I do that, I set that to yes, then every time I receive this item and every time I ship this item, Driven will ask me for a serial number. As a matter of fact, you can see I must have had this on in the past here because I have 2 serial numbers sitting in my different warehouses right now available for sale. So these are my currently in-stock serial numbers of this item that I can sell to customers. So once I set that yes, then I have to define how that serial number happens. So if it's set to be a single, that means each unique serial number per item that I receive. So yes, if I receive 100 of these machines, I have to enter 100 serial numbers. The other option is to be able to do multiples, or what we call lot-based serial numbers. So in an example of that black fabric, maybe I receive 500 yards off of the same lot number. So I would tell the fabric that it tracks by lot number, and then I could receive 500 quantity of one lot number. And then I would use and decrement from that lot number as I ship items. Option as well to be able to make a serialized product have an expiration date. If I set this to yes, then when I input the serial number, when I receive it and ship it, not only do I have to put in the serial number, but I have to put in the expiration date as well. So for perishable products or inks or products that have expiration date or use by date on them, you would be able to input and track that information as well. The option here below that to require the serial number, if I turn that on, then it makes the serial number field mandatory anytime any receiving functions happen or shipping functions happen. Without that turned on, then Driven simply asks for a serial number, but it can be skipped during the receiving and the shipping steps. So it's an optional field by default. But if I set this to yes, then they cannot leave that shipping screen or that receiving screen without entering a serial number. So it makes it mandatory. Also, in that same philosophy, we have the ability to prohibit duplicate serial numbers. So, in other words, not only am I going to make you enter a serial number, but I'm going to have the system check to see if that serial number has already been used before or received before. So if this is turned on and I tried to enter serial number 1237 again, Driven would tell me that that serial number has already been used and I cannot use it again. So it prohibits data entry errors if you set that to yes. You can never duplicate the same serial number on this part number. Okay. And the last option is if you're a manufacturing type of a business, you have the ability to generate internal serial numbers where you identify what the next machine number is. Okay, the last machine number we built was serial number 127. This one's going to be 128, 129, 130. It just keeps sequentially increasing them as you use them. Okay. So that generates itself automatically. And then still in the serial number tracking area, I want to talk a little bit about this, and that is in here, as I mentioned, you see current serial numbers that are sitting in your warehouse right now. This is where you would come to make any serial number modifications. If someone had entered a serial number incorrectly, okay, it really wasn't 1237, it was 1239. I could double-click on that particular serial number and make the correction here. Okay. Also, within here, you would have the flexibility to come and be able to record new serial numbers. However, please be aware if you use this to record new serial numbers, this does not add to your total on-hand quantities for this part number. It doesn't do an item receipt. It doesn't do anything like that. So this is just me saying, okay, here under my primary settings option, or sorry, under my stock option, I see that I have, maybe it says I have 10 available, and I only have 2 serial numbers recorded. I could come here to record the remaining serial numbers. So if I choose to add a serial number here, and I say that there's one more in my California warehouse, and its serial number is blah, 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 okay, and I save those changes. Now you notice under my serial number tracking tab, I have 3 serial numbers sitting in my warehouse as available for sale. But if I move on to my next tab here, which is my stock tab, it only says I have 2 available. So the serial number recording screen is only to be used for parts that are already in your warehouses, have already been received or got received incorrectly. Now the screen that you see here for my stock totals is what's going to show to you as inventory on-hand quantities. So I see that I have 2 available, I have none allocated on sales orders, and I have 0 on purchase orders yet to come in either. Okay? So that's viewing type information as well. These numbers get updated automatically based upon you doing sales or purchases within Driven, or if you physically go adjust inventory within QuickBooks, because that's another thing we need to talk about. Right now, my system tells me that I have 2 of these available sitting on the warehouse shelf. Okay, that information came from QuickBooks and cannot be modified directly here within Driven and expect it to change the on-hand quantity in QuickBooks. Physical counts of inventory items. In other words, I had to do an asset adjustment maybe. Maybe I really only have 1 of those on the warehouse shelf. We lost one somewhere. if I need to write it off, then I have to make that asset adjustment within QuickBooks and synchronize that over to Driven. Sage is asking, do the inventory amounts adjust in real time? They do say from the perspective if you are using Driven as you sell items and ship items and receive items, they do adjust themselves, yes. However, if you do a function outside of Driven, like I was just mentioning, I have to go into QuickBooks and write off one of these assets. I need to do that in QuickBooks and then synchronize that into Driven to update the on-hand quantity within Driven. What I want to make you aware of is if this says I have 2 available and I come into Driven here somewhere and I change this to say, okay, there's really 2 in the California warehouse, 1 in the default warehouse. When I save that, I made an adjustment here. And yes, Driven says that I have 3 available. However, the next time I synchronize with QuickBooks, QuickBooks will say, no, you only have 2. Because that's what I say you physically have in inventory, because we cannot make, as I said, that asset level adjustment to the general ledger. So please be aware that actual total available quantity adjustments have to be made within QuickBooks. Unless you're receiving items and selling items in Driven, then that happens automatically. Okay. These 2 fields here that you can put data into, the reorder point within Driven and the reorder quantity, would be available for you doing that purchasing function and viewing those kinds of things. So I can establish a reorder point of this item of my minimum stock level needs to be 5. And then we have a workspace within Driven that's already created here. As a matter of fact, I think I put it on my inventory screen yesterday, called our low inventory stock. Okay, so things that are below their reorder point. And as you can see right now, my interface kit is below my reorder point because even though I have 3, my established reorder point is 5. So this is kind of your warning to your purchase order people of here are things that they need to replenish. Okay. And that's based off this reorder point number here. Then the reorder quantity is how many I order that in when I replenish my stock. Okay. So that is everything about that stock tab. Woo, I'm trying to type a message here and answer out to Sage, and I'm misspelling things. Hold on one second. Okay, so that's everything about our stock tab. Let's move on to the vendors tab here, which shows me who I purchased this item from. So right now I have an established vendor on this particular interface kit of Lowe's. Lowe's has a different part number for this particular item. So when I buy it from Lowe's, I need to use their part number 15488. Oh, by the way, let me back up a step here. The primary vendor that's set here is listed from the drop-down box of current vendors that are in Driven. So the vendor has to already exist within the software. And you add a vendor just like you add any other account, but you put their category to vendor. That is what is going to make them show up in this drop-down list here. So Lowe's is my first vendor. As I mentioned, that's their part number for this item, and they call it a coin interface kit. So anytime I buy it from them, I need to reference that. Here is the price that I purchase it from them at, and this field here called updated is when is the last time I purchased it at that price. So I know kind of how current that purchase price is. Right? Then I can also come in here and say, okay, my second vendor for this is Milner's Office Equipment, and they just call this interface kit, is their part number for it. And it's called the Driven Interface Kit because it's special for us or something. The price I purchased it from them is $28.99 because they have to custom build it, maybe. And then I can say that I verified that price today. right, and save that information. So you can set and establish up to 5 different vendors for this particular part number. Now, as I create purchase orders, if I create a purchase order to Milner for this part number, Driven will look up and know that, okay, Milner's buy price for this is $28.99. It will automatically change the cost on that item on that purchase order to $28.99 since it's specified from that vendor. Now, you are not required to set all of your vendors here if you don't want to. You can still purchase any products from any vendor, but if that vendor is not listed on their vendors tab, then it will use whatever is in the primary settings here as the costing information. Okay. So that's our vendors tab. Next, we talk about price levels, and this is one of the beginning ways that you can control pricing and discounting within Driven. You can establish on each item. This is kind of comparable to QuickBooks. I think they have a customer price list or something like that they have where you can specify certain prices for certain customers or certain types of customers. So what you would be able to establish here is that discount pricing applies to this, and 4 ways to do that. The first would be able to be defining it by a fixed amount. And if I do that, then each of the levels that I establish here from 2 to 20 would be the new retail price of the item. So level 2 customers maybe would get this at $48.50, okay? And level 3 customers would get it at $47. So I would type in my new retail prices here using the fixed amount option. Then I would set a customer to use, let's say, price level 3. Then anytime that customer purchases this interface kit, the retail price is automatically changed to $47. So that discount, maybe I have wholesale level customers that are level 3 customers. They get special discounts on any items they buy. I would want to establish those under my price levels and then set that customer to use that price level. That way I'm assured that they're locked into their specific pricing. Okay. The 4 ways of doing that, as I mentioned, the first one there is fixed amount, meaning you typing in the new retail prices here. The second one is probably the more common, and that's to set it as a discount off of whatever the current retail price is. The advantage of doing this one is if I come in here and say, okay, you get 5% off on price level 2, you get 10% on price level 3, 15% on price level 4. If I have a price increase, all I have to do is change the retail price, and my discounts will still apply themselves then to whatever the new retail price is. So I don't have to come in and adjust these every single time. All right. Now the third and fourth kind of pricing discount options for this are to be able to mark this item up based on a % of the cost. Okay, and I can base it off either the last cost or the average cost. Okay, Mr. Customer, you get it at 10% above my cost. And I would be able to, if I set this to markup of last cost, then whatever my last cost on the item, based on the primary settings tab screen there, it would mark it up by 5% and put that as the retail price of the item for that particular customer. So a ton of flexibility in how you set up these price levels. As I mentioned, there's up to 20 per item, and you do have to establish them for each individual item in your database. Then you go set each customer to use whatever specific price level you would like for them to. Next are other kind of discounting, which are quantity breaks or volume discounts. And these allow you the flexibility to give customers breaks based upon them purchasing multiples of this item. So right now, if you purchase 5 of these interface kits, then you get either one of 2 options. Either I type in the new price of the item here, you get it at $47.50, or I can say, as I've done here, that you now move up to price level 2, which in the case of this item was set to a 5% discount. If you purchase 10 of this item is my next break or volume discount, then you move up to price level 3, meaning you get a 10% discount. And again, I can keep going with this theory. If you buy 20, then you move up to price level 4 or whatever I want to set in each one of these. These discounts, by the way, apply automatically based upon the salesperson entering a quantity of more than 5. So all they have to do is type in 5, and the new price would be adjusted out to 5% discount of whatever the retail price was in this case. Next, let's talk about our related product tab, because as I mentioned, this is how this item, because it is set as an inventory assembly in QuickBooks, this shows me how this item is built. So I'm able to see here that there are 2 of the 25-cent coin boxes in here, 1 of the dollar coin boxes, and 3 of the $2 coin boxes. That's how this assembly always gets built into QuickBooks. And this is how it's defined and where it's set up. And that option has to be selected for that. Now, the other way that this screen might be used for related products from Driven is QuickBooks also has a feature that it calls a group. And groups work different from assemblies within QuickBooks, because the assembly is something that has to be pre-built ahead of time. It increases the on-hand quantity available and uses up the component pieces as you build those kits. Okay? But a group works at a kind of a time of fulfillment deduction. So you sell the group, and it does not relieve the inventory of the items inside the group until you invoice that group. So these 2 options would come over automatically set as they were set in QuickBooks and work just like they work in QuickBooks. You sell a group, it sells that item, each one of the groups inside of there get invoiced at that time. You sell an assembly, all it does is decrease the on-hand quantity of the assembly item because it's already been pre-built out of the components inside of it. Now, Driven has 2 additional options as well here, the very first one being what we call reference only. Now, if the related products listed under here are listed as reference only, then all it does is show to the people looking up the details of this item and when you're searching for it and adding it to an item. It might be, the fact that you put a manual in there, and you might want to put in the details in the manual in the description or something, or the power cord. It comes along in the box. I want everyone to see that it's there, but I don't want to invoice for it. I don't inventory it. I don't want it to show up on the invoice to the customer. So it is a reference-only kind of information. And the other option is what Driven calls our options and accessories. This gives you the flexibility to create, similar to what QuickBooks uses as a group, in that I can show to you, okay, you order this interface kit. I would like for you to also sell a couple of these coin boxes along with that. You might or might not. So I would want to present it as options and accessories in Driven. So each time a salesperson sells this interface kit, it would show these 3 items to them. But the salesperson would have the flexibility to remove them or change the quantities of them right there on that particular order. So they would say, you know what, they don't want any of the coin boxes. They could take all 3 of them out, and it would sell only the interface kit in that case. Or they could say, sure, they want 3 of each one of the coin boxes. Let's go ahead and sell those with them. So it's your way of setting up an item to do some suggestive selling to your particular salespeople. Or maybe they need to pick from one of these 3 coin boxes. You'd want to show all 3 of them to them, and then they would simply come in here and be able to pick and add and choose what options they wanted within that particular item. So I don't want to mess my part number up too bad, so I'm going to change this back to an inventory assembly. But that is how those 4 link types work within Driven. Now, when you are modifying any one of those 4 types in order to be able to add additional things in here, I want some other coin boxes to be available, I would link them here under the Add Linked Item area. So I would be able to say, show me all my other coin boxes. Oh, I have a coin combo that I can add in there. Boom, let's add that. and it would add one of those. Okay. Debbie's asking a question, how deep can you nest items? Within Driven, Debbie, you can only nest one level deep. No, Driven doesn't go any deeper than Oasis did. Okay. Now, our last option here on an inventory item is to be able to link custom fields to this particular inventory item. And that way you can, if there's additional pieces of information you want to track or keep about this particular part number so that you can report on it or see it in other screens, you'd be able to create the custom field in System Setup and then be able to, now I have a comments box here, and I can type in a comment here. That comment is specifically linked to this interface kit. So it's additional information about this part number that can be held and reported on and shown. Okay. And that covers the basics of our item setup functions within Driven, and the kinds of things that come over and that kind of information. So all of that is visible to you here, as I mentioned, through that inventory research screen. Can be modified from here, updated from here. You are able to create new part numbers from within Driven, and as I mentioned, the first time that get created into QuickBooks is when you receive that item or sell that item. Okay. Now, not required to do our purchasing functions within Driven if you don't want to, so let's actually address one other thing in here regarding inventory, because as I mentioned with my interface kit here, when I changed my on-hand quantities incorrectly, I want to talk about syncing that information with QuickBooks. Now, functions happen automatically as you do item receipts or as you do sales within Driven. It tells it to post over to QuickBooks. Okay? If you are on-premise customer, then those transactions post immediately as soon as you do them. If you are one of our IPP type customers, then you have to do that QuickBooks data sync, okay, to tell it to post over from Driven to QuickBooks. However, both platforms, anytime you want to bring information into Driven from QuickBooks, always has to be done using that synchronization process. So in this case, right now, I would want to sync from QuickBooks to Driven, and I want to synchronize my item list here to get it to match between both systems. Let's say I'd done something in QuickBooks. I'd gone ahead and done my physical count, or I've received some product, and I want that to show up in Driven here. I would do that synchronization. It would tell me here that it's synchronizing the item list right now. Again, keeping in mind that that is only going to be as accurate as your last Intuit data sync that happened here. So if I just made that asset adjustment, it wouldn't have posted up to here because it's not going to go till 5:55 again. Now, I had changed that quantity way beforehand, so I didn't need to worry about that updating. So now if I go look up, I go do my inventory research, and I go look at my interface kit again, I'm back to 2 on hand because QuickBooks said, I don't know what you did in Driven, but I say you have 2 of them. So I'm going to adjust you back to 2. Okay. All right. Any other questions regarding item setup and how items work within creating them and modifying them within Driven? Okay. I'll leave the webinar open for another moment in case you have any other questions, but that really concludes everything for today, guys. Thanks and have a great day.